Earlier this week, I spoke with the senator about news that a former mortgage officer testified before Congress that Dodd knew he was getting a special deal on a mortgage. Senator, let's begin. You've maintained all along that Robert Feinberg is not telling the truth, yet, with all due respect, the denial has been somewhat lukewarm. I mean, this man is threatening to bring you down. 55% in a recent poll don't trust you. So why aren't you out there calling this man a liar, pounding your fist like we know you know how to do, you know how to fight, demanding he be prosecuted for lying under oath and defaming you? Where's the outrage?
Well, I guess part of it is this disbelief that one individual for 14 months make an allegation. I've tried not to get hyperbolic about this thing, but to answer the allegation, I would never. And the evidence is all there. The mortgage rates we received were market rates. People like anyone else in that same category got rates as we did. No special deals. No one ever offered one. And if they had, I would have rejected it and walked away from them immediately. And me pounding a table screaming, I always think sometimes that looks like more guilt than innocence on these matters. But I just say to you categorically, Dennis, I would never have done that. After 30 years in public life, people may disagree with my views on politics, and I understand that. But I have never violated that confidence and trust that the people invested in me when they elected me to the United States Senate. And one individual for 14 months continues to repeat the same statements and doesn't offer any evidence, except he claims he talked to me 7 years ago, which he claims it was some brief conversation of a few minutes at best. I never met with him, never negotiated with him over the mortgages we refinanced on the home. So I'm waiting for the Ethics Committee to reach its conclusion. I regret that I didn't address it even in these terms back last summer and fall when they were first made. I thought the committee would rule earlier than it did. So in a sense, I'm being held hostage by a process here that hasn't reached a result, and I hope they do soon, because clearly this hurts. And the numbers you mentioned, when you're losing your home and your health care and your jobs, and you hear about a public official that's been accused of doing something wrong, the tendency is to believe it.
Senator, why?
And so I'm paying a price for that.
Senator, why would he go in front of a congressional panel and lie under oath, knowing he could go to prison? What would his motive be?
I don't know. He was subpoenaed to testify. I'm glad he did, so they could finally hear from him. Of course, he's decided to release the text of that transcript, and that's his business. He's not prohibited from doing that. But you don't think he's telling the truth? That indicates to me, in a sense, he doesn't have the confidence of what he's saying, and whether or not he was credible in front of that committee.
One of your potential opponents, Sem Caligiuri, said today that if this turns out that Feinberg is telling the truth, you should resign. If that should come to pass, would you resign? If it turns out that there are some documents?
Politics, Dennis. You know, I've got 4 or 5 opponents out there, and there's no lack of statements. We're 18 months away from Election Day. A lot more needs to be done. Obviously, working on the issues we're confronting every day, and the political season now doesn't have a season anymore. It's 12 months out of the year, and I accept that. I understand that, but I think the words used by these opponents are sort of predictable in a political environment.
Former party chair Ed Marcus said this past weekend that if you don't turn around the polls by October, Democrats should perhaps think about going with another candidate. What do you think is best for the Democratic Party? If you continue to show that you're losing to Rob Simmons, is it wise to stay in the race?
Well, Dennis, look, you stay and you work hard and plug hard on these things. And again, campaigns can turn on a dime. You know, remember John McCain carrying his own suit with him on his bag. His presidential campaign was over. The medium said he ought to pack his bag and quit. He shouldn't seek the Republican nomination for president, that he had no chance whatsoever of winning. And John McCain ended up being the overwhelming choice of the Republican Party at that convention. So people declaring people's obituary politically prematurely are rather, the list is rather long, and I'm not going to succumb to that kind of threats. I mean, I'll do my job every day, have a lot of confidence. I've been endorsed and supported by town committees across the state in many cases, and I appreciate that loyalty and support. I'm believing that after this many years in public life, we're accused by one individual 14 months ago, and no change in what he's offered, no evidence to the contrary, just some conversation he claims he had with me almost 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, that I have flatly denied ever occurred and that I ever accepted any kind of sweetheart deal at all. I would hope there'll be people at some point who may begin to believe what I'm saying is true.
Senator, I know that you have your hands on a lot of projects down there, so would like to invite you to come and face the state one of these days again, and we can spend the whole half hour talking about a variety of issues.
I'd enjoy it, Dennis.
Today.
No, and I appreciate you treated me very well when I was on there before, and I look forward to being back.
Well, one could argue that your poll numbers went up after your appearance on Face the State, so you never know.
There you go.
All right,
I'll do it
Senator.
every week with you.
Senator, good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Senator, would love to
Thank
have you
you,
back
Dennis.
as soon as you get well again. So, welcome back to Face the State. What do you think of the senator's demeanor in this interview? I mean, this issue has gone on for a long time, but then again, the denials aren't very strong.
Well, I think that as the senator said, there are those people about whom you might say he doth protest too much. During the break, we were just, discussing Bill Clinton and how adamant he was that he did not have sexual relations with that woman. I mean, what does demeanor really mean? I mean, the question is what's the truth and what's not. And I think it's pretty clear that this guy Feinberg is not telling the truth.
Well, but he could be prosecuted. So why isn't, the senator saying, or Democrats? And Nancy DiNardo this week came out and she basically blamed this whole thing on Republicans. Rather than saying, let's see Robert Feinberg prosecuted for telling these lies. Dean?
Well, first of all, it was a very good interview, I thought, and it was very revealing. It shows, on the one hand, that obviously Senator Dodd has thought about how he should respond. Should he respond strongly? Should he take a step back? Should he be as calm as possible about it? So, obviously, from a political point of view, they've thought, Senator Dodd and the people around him have thought about how to respond.
But it's still lingering. It won't go away.
It's still lingering, and again, I think Senator Dodd's bigger problem going into 2010 is not just countrywide, but it's the long list of issues that he's faced over the last several months that are going to come back and be used against him during a campaign. I think, frankly, one of the most damaging pieces of information that might be used effectively against him in the coming campaign is the idea that he helped a friend get a presidential pardon. That, I think, to most people smacks of a conflict of interest, a situation he shouldn't have been that involved in.
This is
but to say that it keeps lingering as though it's Senator Dodd's fault. I mean, I think there's been some serious journalistic malpractice that's gone on with some stories that have not been accurate that get repeated and repeated by the media. And I'm, as you know, a former reporter and a booster of the media, but I think there have been cases where it's easy to quote another source and say, well, this was in the Wall Street Journal, so therefore it's fact. And there's been kind of a laundering of facts that have gone on and gotten repeated, and I don't think the substance has necessarily been there, or the accuracy has necessarily been there.
The story this week was from the Associated Press, right, and Robert Feinberg?
There was absolutely nothing new in there, and in fact, many newspapers around the state have done stories that said that the rate that the Dodds got, they could have gotten better rates elsewhere. So I think what's been a big problem for Senator Dodd is that mortgages are something that the public can understand because so many people have a mortgage. And understandably, there would be outrage if somebody got a sweetheart deal. That wasn't the case here, but as he has said, he didn't refute it early enough last year, so it has lingered and that impression has stayed there, which I think is an incorrect impression.
Well, there's also the matter that there is an investigation ongoing, so as long as there is an investigation, there's going to be press coverage of that investigation. Another thing that we should consider is the possibility that both Feinberg and Dodd are telling the truth from their perspective. In other words, it could be that people at Countrywide believe they were giving Senator Dodd some kind of special treatment. It could also be true that Senator Dodd didn't understand that he was being given special treatment. Those two things could be true at the same time.
And I think all those who are supporters of Senator Dodd, are looking forward to having that ethics committee report come out. Because that's what we're waiting for.
Former party chairman Ed Marcus last week on this program said that if the senator doesn't turn the poll numbers around within 90 days, Democrats should really think about looking at some other candidates.
Oh, Ed Marcus is still mad that years ago, when many Democrats wanted to have Ed Marcus thrown out as party chairman, that Chris Dodd was one of those who tried to make that happen. So, I mean, that's my only...
Old sour grapes?
Well, I think that's certainly the perspective from which he is coming on that, but I'll let you finish your
But Republicans would much rather run against Dodd than another Republican, another Democrat, correct?
That's true. If you talk to Republicans privately, the last thing they want is for Senator Dodd to retire because they think they have a better chance against him than any of the other Democrats who might be out there to take his place.
Well, you know, Juby, QU hasn't done this poll yet, but we imagine it's coming. We hear that something like this is in the works. I mean, if a poll comes out showing that Senator Dodd is losing to Rob Simmons, but that Richard Blumenthal would beat Simmons handily, will Democrats start to think, well, you know, maybe it is time. Maybe this trend of bad poll numbers over several months' time, you know, maybe it is time.
I think there's a great loyalty to Senator Dodd out there. I think
there is, you know.
I mean, because you know, put anybody down in Washington who is a freshman, Democrat or Republican, and the state is going to suffer. I mean, I think that's what people forget all the time, is the seniority and the longevity Senator Dodd has helped numerous people in this state and will continue to.
Juby McDowell, your website, Laurel CT, Dean Pagani, media attaché. Thank you so much for being with us as well. And Senator, of course, on behalf of all of us here at Channel 3, we wish you a speedy recovery and hope to have you back up here with us very soon.